Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Women Making Big Sales. Today, I am going to be interviewing Jaclyn Curtis. She is the Chief Operating Officer at Band, a leading B2B lead generation solution that combines the power of technology with a full service managed service. She's also the COO of Zopto, another LinkedIn social selling platforms. With her 12 years of experience, I'm sure she's seen it all when it comes to helping B2B companies build their sales and marketing strategies. So I'm going to pick her brain, see what works behind the scenes, and we can use it for our own business. Hello, Jaclyn. Welcome to Women Making Big Sales.
Hi, thank you. So happy to be here.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited for this episode. I've been thinking about all the questions I'm going to be asking you because you have seen so many behind the scenes of sales strategies for B2B companies. And I want to ask you first question. Naturally, the question I have is when you look at B2B companies and when they, in terms of their email strategy or LinkedIn strategies, what has been working so far? Do you start to see some kind of consistency in terms of success factors when it comes to reaching out to their prospective clients?
Yeah, so much of it, I think, comes down to strategy. And this is such a good question because businesses come to us from across the board in terms of where they are currently with their sales process and sales strategy. So it gives us a lot of insight into, their background and what they've seen work and not work up to that point, and then what we have been able to do for them, especially using that information and taking different approaches. So on our end, I think that it really comes down to a few things. For one, having a targeted list. So we see a lot of people just kind of taking a spray and pray approach. Which in some ways that can be effective because you kind of don't know who might be in the market. Some of that information and data is still hard to find or it's expensive to get. But creating a targeted list and then really customizing the messaging to go along with that has been really effective for our customers. So instead of going in with a really broad campaign list with really broad messaging, really tailoring that down and speaking to the audience and who it is that you're targeting, whether that's industry specific, title specific, maybe it's a certain problem facing, startups or enterprise businesses when it comes to a certain change in the market. So really customizing that messaging. I think another thing that is really helpful that we've seen comes down to also analytics. So having some kind of reporting and analytics tool so that you can see what's working for your specific business and your specific campaigns. So what you might see working with one industry, one job title, one company size might not work for another one, but you keep using the same approach over and over again and not seeing success. So really understanding and being able to A/B test and get visibility into the audiences that are most responsive and kind of really honing in on your ideal customer profile by channel, because that is going to make a difference. Another thing that I think that we've been seeing a lot recently are people that are looking to establish partnerships with businesses. So in the past, from when I first started at the company, I saw a lot of companies that were really hesitant to use any of their outreach to target similar industry companies or complementary services. And I've seen that evolve over the course of the last few years, where people have become more and more open to speaking with similar companies in their industry, or again, a complementary one, and establishing some kind of partnership with them, which I think is really powerful, especially depending on the type of partnership that you're looking for. And lastly, I would say lead nurturing is like huge. So making sure that you're nurturing the leads, I think, is really like number one. Sorry, I have somebody mowing my lawn if you can hear some background noise. Problems of working from home. But definitely lead nurturing is a big pitfall that we see with a lot of companies. And I think something that is completely underrated as a strategy.
All right. So maybe we can just kind of get back. I was so excited to ask you that this big question about what works behind the scenes. I actually forgot to ask you to kind of introduce a little bit of Band versus Zopto so that the listeners would have a little bit of background in terms of exactly what Band does and what Zopto does, and how do you combine the both, or whether you should be combining the both. So could you just share with us a little bit of your company?
Yeah, so Zopto is a LinkedIn social selling platform. It's a self-service, although we do offer more of a managed service component in terms of appointment setting. And so that really allows people to go in and automate their LinkedIn outreach and connect with their audiences using their networks. And then Bant is a little bit more of a comprehensive solution in terms of it being more moving into omni-channel. So Bant is a sales and marketing acceleration solution. So we do email outreach, social outreach, so very similar to what we do on the Zapdo side. We also do retargeting campaigns, PPC, and we have a sales chatbot. So all of those channels speak really nicely to one another and really complement each other. And on the Bant side, it's a completely managed service. So we do everything end to end from, going through the onboarding experience, doing all of the setup, implementation, analysis, all of the strategy, everything like that.
Okay. So when it comes to an entrepreneur that has to decide which kind of service or what channel works best for them, we talked a little bit about omni-channel,
Mhm.
strategies, and but sometimes, as an entrepreneur, we're probably limited in terms of our resources or even the thought of omni-channels, like so many
Mhm.
channels, and try to reach your prospective clients uh, in different social media platforms, different strategies. How do we get started? How do we determine the best sales strategy that we should focus on?
Yeah, so people take two approaches. They either start with one and they scale up, either because they're not seeing success with that channel or because they are seeing so much success that they want to expand and see how else they can increase their activity. Or you start broad, you start with several different channels, and then you either see success with all of them and keep all of those channels active, or you start scaling back the ones that don't work. So what I think is really interesting is that we do see some customers have a lot of success on LinkedIn, but they don't see as much success on email, or vice versa. They want ad campaigns like retargeting, but once we get into the campaign, we realize that they don't really have enough website traffic to see an ROI from retargeting. So then that gives them some data and analytics to go in and make changes, in some of their marketing campaigns and things like that to increase that activity and be able to tap into other channels.
Okay. So basically you got to test it out. Everything is about testing, testing.
Yes.
And I also love the first strategy you talked about is understanding your list instead of
Mhm.
spray and pray, to be really conscious of who you're going after and their titles and stuff like that. Do your company support or help them create that ideal client? Because a lot of times we know we can support companies, but we feel like our service can benefit so many people and we're
Mhm.
excited to benefit as many people as possible. Like, how do you find that target? Because people get nervous. Like, I feel like if I focus on one segment, that means that I'm gonna have to give up on everybody else. Do you have any
Yeah.
suggestions for that?
So I think that's the beauty of automation, is that you don't really have to choose. It
Mhm.
really enables you to be able uh, to tap into all of those different markets and see which one works. Again, using analytics is really important. If you're doing all of this outreach manually, then you are going to have to be a lot more picky about where you decide to spend your efforts, and you may or may not get it right. And after that, you just spent a whole bunch of time and money and things like that invested into all of that outreach. So that's why we're such a big proponent of leveraging automation. Not because we want to oversaturate the market, and our team is very consultative in making sure that our customers are using the best approach and how to use automation so that you still can create those targeted lists. But it's just so much more beneficial to a company, especially small businesses, entrepreneurs, to leverage automation. And on the flip side of that, too, what's also really interesting is you don't know your ICP might be different per channel. So, somebody might have had really great success going to events, and being there in person and speaking with people at events, or going to, different networking events, or cold calling or something like that. Or even their source of referrals, what their ICP looks like from referral sources. And that might be really different than the types of responses that you're going to get using a cold outreach method. And there are obviously several, whether that be email or LinkedIn. And so really being able to leverage automation to hone in on who is your best customer profile per channel. And automation allows you to do that.
You mentioned the ICP. So for those people who do not know about ICP, that would be your ideal client profile.
Yes, correct.
Yes. Right. So that's amazing. But for some people listening, there's always that fear that when we talk about leveraging automation, they get afraid of coming off too spammy, especially on
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn and emails. Sometimes we do get some very salesy, very spammy messages. So while automation is amazing for scaling, there's always that fear of spamming our prospective clients. How do you find balance in this?
Yeah, I think it's a couple different things. So one, I would say don't be afraid. There are strategies that you can take in terms of how many touch points you have with a prospect, how your messaging comes across in terms of the tone and the approach that you take in the messaging. Making sure that your lists are targeted and that you are conveying some value in your message. It is going to come across spammy if you go in with a very generic message to a very broad audience. But if you're able to really speak to the pain point of the audience in your list, it's not going to come across as spammy because you're going to be speaking directly to an issue that they're facing. And then second to that, I think is just really building the relationships, like finding the common ground with the prospects, which you can do through automation in several different ways, not just using Bant and Zopto, but there are lots of other tools out there to generate data that actually can be uploaded into our system to create some of those targeted lists from, Facebook groups and things like that. And then I would say be open to having conversations. Really, cold outreach is not intended to sell within the message. It really should be about opening up the conversation and establishing that relationship and, finding ways that you can be mutually beneficial to each other. So again, like a partnership approach, maybe that person could be a customer, but, maybe there's a way to, cross-sell services or have referrals or be an affiliate or something like that. There are so many different ways that you can connect with a business in that sense. And I would say, also don't be afraid to ask for referrals in the message, ask for advice. So, like, what are you seeing in your industry? Like, let's have a conversation and just take that really like human to human approach and realize that it's not always the short play. Some cold outreach, it really does require that relationship building, that nurturing. You're not always going to necessarily see an immediate ROI, and that's okay because that's not always what it's intended for.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, in the end, even though it's business to business, but we're still talking about people to people. We are
Mhm.
trying to find a win-win solution as a partner together. And if you are
Right.
able to help somebody achieve their goals, then it becomes a very natural conversation about working together and having the person as a client. So the whole thought of, oh, I'm afraid of reaching out to people and becoming spammy, if we're just thinking about trying to connect with people and try to find ways to support them, then a whole conversation becomes a little bit more natural.
Yeah.
You mentioned a little bit about depending on how many touch points from your, now we talk about more detailed questions would be, how many touch points do you usually recommend when it comes to reaching out to people on LinkedIn versus emails?
Yeah, so we see about 3 on email. We can sometimes we suggest going into 4. It's very, very rare. And when I say suggest, it's really just that, we can do it if the customer feels very strongly about it. But our data has shown that once you kind of get beyond the third attempt to reach out to somebody, that they just start falling off. There's really no benefit in continuing on trying to reach out past 3, at least in that moment. So, if you want to go back and recycle through the data in a few months, maybe, you're catching them at a better time or something like that, you can always attempt that. But in one go, it's really about 3. On the LinkedIn side of things, it's a little different because, you could go in with, a lot of the times people will customize their invite messages to have, something in there regarding why you're reaching out. Some people choose to keep it generic. So whether or not that's an actual touch point, I think can be a little subjective. But we generally say about 2 to 3 on LinkedIn. And, because it is a channel that a lot of people use for outreach, you don't want to just add to the noise. You want to, try to connect, try to keep it targeted. And you can always, once you build that network of yours, go back in and reach out to them at a later time. And then once you are connected, and they start seeing your feed and updates, if you are active on LinkedIn, that is kind of more of a passive way to get in front of them by just posting updates about your business, about what you're doing, trying to reinforce your brand awareness. And then it becomes a lot less of a cold touch point once you do go to reach out months down the road.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And then you also talked about the importance of lead nurturing and how to make sure that you continue to build that relationship. And that is often a challenge I hear entrepreneurs face, is that they feel comfortable reaching out to people at the beginning. Hey, look forward to connecting with you. This is what I do, and let's talk. But
Mhm.
if we don't hear from people after 2 or 3 messages, then they start to figure, we start to wonder, hey, what should I say afterwards? How do I nurture the leads? Do you have some ideas that you could share with us to nurture these leads and build relationship?
Yeah. So, once a conversation is open, or even if not, even if you reached out a few times, you didn't hear from the person, those are kind of 2 different things. And what we really focus on, because we are generating leads for our customers. And one of the biggest pain points for our customers is being able to convert those leads. And once we kind of go into their sales process and dissect it a little bit, what we've been finding is that they really aren't doing those follow-ups too much. Or when they are doing their follow-ups, they're going in really heavy. They're trying to sell in the message, or they're going in with a really lengthy email, or they're going in with, a 15-page attachment about their services. And people just, they don't really want to see that. They want to know like what's in it for them. So, when you do nurture a lead, I think a lot of it comes down to the strategy that you're using and not necessarily the amount of times. So quality over quantity. And making sure that you are trying to focus on continuing the conversation. And again, maybe going in, and if they're not interested in what you're selling at the moment, trying to flip that around and saying like, well, would you be open to a conversation then on, who you are using currently, what you like about them, what you don't, and almost use it as market research. See if you can get them subscribed to a newsletter, liking your social media page, just connecting on LinkedIn. So again, you can reinforce your brand and show them that you're an authority in the space. So there are lots of different ways that you can nurture a lead. And then I would say, don't bother them. Don't, if you feel like you're starting to spam them, then you probably are. So pump the brakes a little bit and focus on some other prospects in your list. The prospects, that should be a revolving door of leads. And then reach back out in a few months, maybe with a different proposition, or whether that be a different service that you're selling, but offer something new in that touch point, something that might pique their interest if you weren't able to pique it before.
That's amazing. I think that's what a lot of times what the mistakes we make is we have one try and we try one proposition and that did not work and we started thinking, "Oh my God, this is never going to work. I'm not fit for this and no one's ever going to buy from me." But maybe the simple thing is just try something else. Try to
Right.
find different solutions, different propositions and different ways to connect with people. And you talked about something that I thought it was really interesting is the fact that people might sometimes write this lengthy email because there's so much you want to say about what we do, right? We're never, how can we describe our company in just two short sentences, right? Um, can you share with us a little bit of the effective messaging strategies that you've seen um, when you help your companies and so that this can be helpful for whoever's listening to this podcast.
Yeah, so this is something we bump up against all the time, especially dealing with people's marketing teams. Is, what we suggest is something very straight to the point. Do not try to sell, just try to immediately convey what's in it for them. So they can read their email quickly. No one spends more than 3 seconds reading an email, especially unsolicited. So you need to really go in with exactly like what is in it for that person. Speak to their pain points, speak to their industry, speak to whatever it is that is going to capture their attention and do it quickly. People are not interested in a long list of who your other customers are, how your business got started, how passionate you are about your business. Those are things that might be important to them once they open a conversation with you as part of their due diligence. But in terms of evaluating that initial email, they're not going to sit and read a lengthy email. They're just not. Where we kind of bump up against people's marketing departments is they want to kind of put in all of that fluff and make it seem really interesting, but that's not really what captures people's attention. Some of the things that we've been seeing recently, just from cold emails that we get internally, people are taking some different approaches, but I think that it really comes down to those being a little bit warmer, kind of more down the funnel. So I just recently got an email from gong.io with a custom poem for myself. We're seeing people started incorporating more videos, which can be effective, but you just have to really, you have to do it in a way that's tactful. And again, if your goal is to use automation, making sure that it does still fit in line with that strategy. You can't, there are ways to do custom videos using AI, but most people don't have the tools and technology to send custom videos to a really wide audience. And there are other complications that come with that if you're trying to do it yourself, like getting trapped in spam filters and things like that.
Yeah, and I always tell people marketing and sales are not the same. Marketing is stuff you put on your website, on your social media post, but sales is like having personal conversation. Imagine you
Mm,
talking to your next door neighbor. When you just strike up that conversation at the beginning, you don't start talking to people about where you're born, they influence your father, how your father's
all
impacted
right.
you, or you always start with a simple conversation. As the conversation progresses, then you start building a relationship and you can get into deeper, kind of more meaningful conversations. But at the beginning, just imagine yourself saying hi to your next door neighbor. You're not gonna
Yeah.
go, yeah, go too
And
much
on the
into
flip side of
details.
that, kind of using that same analogy, you don't go talking to your next door neighbor and start talking figures either. Or,
Yes.
like going in too hard, you have to, nurture, build that relationship. So you don't want to go too hard on either end. The sweet spot is kind of in the middle and, immediately kind of finding that connection, common ground, and how you can deliver value.
Yeah, yeah, love this. Now, the past year, we all know it's been a bit crazy. There's the COVID. And do you start to see a lot of people, obviously, we're all transitioning to virtual selling. And now, things are starting to get back to normal for some parts of the world. Some parts are still facing COVID. Do you see a change or continue change to virtual selling, or will people get back to the normal? What are your like what kind of strategy do you see right now? Do you see people selling a little bit differently?
So I would say for our audience, especially being, B2B, a lot of our companies that we work with are in the SaaS space. They're consultants, they're digital marketing agencies, they're in tech. A lot of those companies have been selling online for a while.
Mhm.
And so in, the kind of post-COVID slash still COVID world, a lot of them just kind of had to refocus their efforts on virtual selling. That meant any events that they were going to and things like that, they put on the side. But I would say that there are still some of those industries where traditional marketing may make sense, that have had to focus on virtual selling today. But I don't really think it's one or the other. I think if you're seeing success and you have the option to do some of those more traditional marketing and sales events and things like that, that you should continue to do that, because again, that might hit a totally different market than what you're going to hit online. And we see that with companies, especially some of those companies that they might have like a really high ticket item, and then they might also have like a lower ticket item. So, those higher ticket items that might be like hundreds of thousands of dollars for a particular product or service, maybe cold outreach isn't the best for that, but then they're able to focus their cold outreach on some of those lower ticket items and reach more people with the hope of eventually upgrading them to their more expensive products or services. But it can be sometimes challenging for companies, I think, that are selling things that are hundreds of thousands of dollars to kind of just go in cold. Sometimes that does require a different sales process. Not to say that we don't. We've had people that have had success, but it's just, again, about the ideal customer profile and the channel that works best for that demographic.
Definitely. And you got to know, yeah, for sure. Our sales journey is unique. Everybody's a little bit different. And if you're wondering whether you should leverage LinkedIn for sales, one tip I would recommend is start doing research on your ideal clients on LinkedIn. And if you look at their LinkedIn profiles and they're not active on LinkedIn, they only have like two LinkedIn connections and there's barely anything on their LinkedIn profile, it's probably not useful trying to reach them via LinkedIn. So that should be your first step, is just to do a bit of LinkedIn research on your ideal clients. But on the other hand, if you see them active on LinkedIn, constantly posting and constantly interacting, then you know that they're active on LinkedIn and you're more likely to reach out to them on LinkedIn. So
Yeah.
for companies, especially small entrepreneurs, because our community, we're female entrepreneurs selling to corporate clients. How do we know whether automation is good for us? What would you recommend when we sit there and we start to wonder, should I incorporate this as part of my sales strategy?
I would say just try it. Like there's no harm in trying it. At the very least, you might find that you might close more deals, you might reach more people, you might increase your brand awareness and things like that. And ultimately, if you find it doesn't work for you, you didn't damage anything. But I can say, just from having worked with hundreds of different businesses across, different industries, especially in my customer success role, because I was directly customer facing when I did customer success for a couple of years, and having all of those conversations on a daily basis, people are automation is saving them time, it's saving them money. They're connected to more people than ever. One person cannot do it all. Even with a sales team, you can't do it all. And the reporting, the information that they get from that, just for their own market research, is really invaluable. We plug in with everybody's CRM system, so the data all speaks to each other, and we integrate with Zapier and things like that. So I would say just try it. And, but if you don't see success right away, I would say don't rule it out. Like, figure out what the strategy is, continue to A/B test, and really hone in on how automation can work for you.
That's amazing. All right. So now we've talked about what's been working and maybe people should consider automations. What do you see future of sales? What's going to happen? Do you have a kind of like um, uh, a magic, what is it called? The 8 ball or something to tell us,
Yeah.
yeah, what's like the future of sales that we should be prepared for? Do you start seeing something that we should be prepared for?
Yeah, so I would say I don't think that the current channels are going anywhere. I think that people just have to know how to use them more strategically and effectively to break through the noise and not come across spammy. And using the right tools to do that as well. There are other channels that I think are emerging. So, for instance, Slack, our team, our head of growth is in quite a few Slack groups that's being used for B2B. I was just speaking with one of our agencies the other day. He's seeing a lot of success on WhatsApp, especially in the Asian market, tapping into LinkedIn groups. Being a part of Facebook groups that are relevant to your industry or even relevant to your job role. So like I'm in, some SaaS growth hacks groups, some executive groups, some LinkedIn groups, and it just gives us so much information, but also is a platform for you to connect and get your business out there. I would say, also like Clubhouse is another one. I've heard great things from my team. I don't use it myself, but that's another one that people are seeing. And also part of that is establishing yourself as an authority in this space and as the thought leader in this space. So being able to go and engage in these Slack conversations, Clubhouse, these Facebook group, LinkedIn groups. It's not just about selling or even establishing those relationships from a sales standpoint, but establishing your credibility, your thought leadership, sharing, incorporating marketing into your sales strategy. Although to your point, they're very different, but how can you kind of repurpose some of those conversations and content to make your marketing and targeting more effective? And then using that data. So as part of, it's not a channel, it's not like an outreach channel or anything like that, but leveraging data is part of your selling strategy, part of your social strategy, not just relying on, your CRM for a list of contacts, but really dissecting, what's working, what's not by profile, I think is really huge.
Awesome. All right. So now I've got my last question. I feel like I've asked you so many things. I really made you work hard
No, these are
here.
such good questions.
I love, love, love your answers. And I really hope that, you're the people, whoever's listening, everybody's as inspired as I am. I'm taking down so much note. And now my last question for you. This is a question I like to ask executives, people like COO, because a lot of women we sell to executives like you. So I'm sure you're being approached a lot. You probably get lots of LinkedIn messages about different things you do, maybe, marketing consulting or some other, recruiting and things like that. What would pick your interest if you're getting approached? Like if you're getting a cold outreach or cold message, what kind of message would pick your interest?
So I guess that's kind of a tough one because I guess it's kind of something that everybody knows, especially having listened to my answers and I know having listened to your other podcasts too. But it's really, I think, comes down to the timing and the relevancy of the message. Being crafty or establishing, again, that kind of like common ground and not coming across salesy. I am much more inclined to accept a LinkedIn invite of somebody who looks like they're trying to genuinely connect with me on some level, even if I know that the underlying intentions may be to sell.
Of course, yes.
Then I am to have somebody come in and, try to sell me directly from a LinkedIn invite or directly from a LinkedIn message. Like I said, the one Gong.io who recently approached me via email sticks out because they were crafty in their message and it was just something unusual that I haven't seen before. And we happen to be in the market for a similar type service. Like our head of growth Stephen, he had just written not that long ago about Gong or looking into those types of services. I also think just like that timing, it really comes down to it and how they approached us. I'm sure it was through some kind of like marketing intelligence or sales intelligence tool that they probably knew we were scoping out their website. But, hitting me just at the right time when I was familiar with their brand and their company, and I am having those conversations, like that's what really sticks out.
I love this because basically, a lot of times we think that sales is about how to use that magic sales template or message template to trick people to buying from us. But the reality I often say is that sales is about finding those people who's got challenges we can solve. It's about
Right.
finding the right people, like what you said, the list, finding a good
Mhm.
list of your ideal clients and the timing, because if they got the challenges we can solve, they're more likely to respond to us. And rather
Right.
than trying to find a tricky way to convince them to buy from us, or is there a best strategy, it's about just looking for people, use analytics to find the group of people that would respond to us and be there in terms of finding that perfect timing. So
Right. Which again is, to what we talked about earlier, not being afraid to reach out again down the road. Because if I might not be in the market for it today, in 3 months, you might hit me at just the right time. And even if I didn't respond before and your message comes across my desk, I might jump on the phone with you that day. So, definitely don't just throw out those lists if they didn't work for you the first time around. Go back in with it at a different time, see if you can connect and it's a better timing.
yes, I've been in business for 20 years. Things always change. And I'm sure most of
Right.
us have seen it last year in terms of all the unprecedented events. So things are always
Right.
changing. Things are
Nothing's
always
changing more
changing.
than now.
Exactly. So don't be afraid just because right now they don't have a need. There will always be a need or somehow
Yeah.
down the road. So life's full of surprises. Jaclyn, thank you so much for sharing all the amazing insight with us. And if people want to connect with you, can they connect with you on LinkedIn?
Yes, absolutely. Don't try to sell me in the message. Just look to connect. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly. But if you want to connect with Jaclyn on LinkedIn, do so or check out. I'll make sure to share your company's website in the resource section so that make sure to check out the company, the service they provide. And I want to thank you so much for sharing all the behind the scenes with us.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
All
Good luck,
right.
everyone.
I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next time.